This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed.
The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Claire Kimball.
And I'm Jodie Spears.
We'll start with a bit on the plate of the Albanese government. We're talking about COP summits, health funding, and also what Susan Lee and the coalition are up to next post their abandonment of the net zero emissions policy.
And strap yourself in because we have an around the grounds wrap up of what's dominating news around the country.
It's a very Aussie-focused weekly wrap of the news this week. And we have a connection with the Speaker of the House of Representatives to tell you about.
Let's get into it.
Jodie, did you go to schoolies on the Goldie?
I did. I must say my recollections are a little bit hazy. I know one of the girls got heat stroke. Someone else had too many of those disgusting sugary vodka cruiser coloured drinks. But it was a lot of fun. It was our first big adventure without being supervised, I think.
Yeah, I went, no doubt, a few years before you to the Goldie, me and my girls. I'm still very much in touch with those girls. We caught the train from Albury to the Gold Coast.
Must have taken like a full day.
Oh, and a bit, I think. It was a long time. We stayed at a place called the Sands at Surfers Paradise. It was a long time ago. I think I had 2 beers.
The whole week?
The whole week.
Oh, you were much more responsible than me.
We weren't drinkers much, but I got the most incredible tan. I do remember that. Not that that's something to gloat about these days.
No, but back then it was. We're talking about this, of course, because Schoolies officially kicks off today. Thinking of all the parents who've sent their precious cargo off to locations around Australia, around the world. I'm sure they'll do you proud.
Yeah, internationally these days.
Well, actually, my brother went to Bali for Schoolies, and I thought, what could possibly go wrong with a group of just 18-year-old boys completely unsupervised
in Bali?
My mum was like, do not come home with a tattoo.
And if he adhered to that, he did very well indeed. No doubt did the Spears family proud. And look, I think for parents, what you don't know won't hurt you. So
exactly.
Let's just, as long as they're safe, let's just keep it there. Moving on to the main news of the week, and it follows a bit of a theme this month, which is Aussie politics. We'll get into the leadership changes that have happened in the next section. But to start with federal politics, it's provided us with a few angles this week, and I think they can benefit with a bit of explanation.
Yeah, for sure. Over the last couple of weeks, we've talked about the state of the coalition, Susan Lee's leadership, and the Libs and Nats walking away from their support of the emissions reduction target of net zero by 2050. This week, there's a couple of items on the Albanese government side of the ledger before we get to the coalition.
Yeah, starting with COP. And sorry, if you're in Adelaide, you'll have to go to Türkiye if you want to get some COP31 action. COP, of course, is that big annual global meeting that the United Nations puts on. Essentially, the majority of the world is engaged. Not so much the United States these days, but China is playing a bit more of a role. The mission, of course, is limiting global warming and mitigating damage from climate change. They have that meeting to set targets and then to track progress. We were up against Turkey to host next year's event, COP31. It would be an event that we would hold alongside our Pacific Island family, but it's not to be.
Yeah, it's quite the mess, actually. Australia had been campaigning for more than 3 years to host COP31, and we had the numbers from the group of nations that decides who will host, but Turkey was more stubborn than us. They refused to budge, and because these decisions need consensus, they basically just held the whole thing hostage.
Yeah, if they just had a vote, we would have won it, but they need to agree, and Turkey wouldn't agree.
It's a strange system.
It really is. And actually it was Peter Malinauskas, the South Australian Premier, who went really hard at the United Nations saying this system really sucks. He called it quite outrageous. Energy and Climate Change Minister Chris Bowen is trying to spin the outcome as outstanding. He will lead COP31, like the actual process, the actual meeting in a sort of presidency role. Turkey will host it still, but he'll still be front and centre. It's been a bit messy this week, though, because Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been saying things that made it throughout the week that made it sound like Australia was walking away. Meanwhile, Bowen, who was in Brazil at COP30 with the decision makers, he was insisting that we were still in it to win it.
Yeah, all a bit confusing. There were reports yesterday that government insiders are actually relieved that we're not going to be hosting. It would have cost between $1.3 and $2 billion to host, and we would have seen 40,000 climate officials and activists come to Adelaide, many demanding that Australia shut down fossil fuel exports, so that would have been a bit awkward.
Probably would have been pretty good, of course, for the hospitality sector across Adelaide and the region to host all of those people, but politically tricky for the Albanese government, and that's because it would have put a spotlight on their emissions reduction approach. So just to give you a bit of background into that, in September, the government announced that Australia's 2035 emissions reduction target. So that target now is we're aiming for 62 to 70% below 2005 levels. The Climate Change Authority, which is the government body that advises the government on these sorts of things, it says to hit those targets, we'd need to take some really urgent action.
Like electric vehicles making up nearly all new car sales by 2035, also a massive increase in renewable energy to about 90% of the grid, and significant changes to agriculture and industry. The government has distanced itself from those specific measures. They basically said yes to the target, but TBD on how we actually get there.
Yeah, so the skeptics say the timing is really quite telling that they announced that target just a couple of months before the final decision on COP31 was being made, that it was certainly a really good target to have while we were pitching to have that big summit. So not hosting COP takes a bit of the pressure off the government on that front. Speaking of political pain, let's get into hospital funding. There's been quite a brawl on that this week.
Yeah, we should explain how hospital funding works because it's not something everyone dives deeply into. Hospitals, of course, are run by the states. They employ the doctors and nurses, manage the buildings, decide on services, but the money comes from both the state and federal governments through a cost-sharing arrangement. So right now the Commonwealth pays about 37% and the states pay the rest of it.
But what Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has promised is to increase the Commonwealth government's share of that funding arrangement to 42.5% by 2030. He made that promise a year ago. The catch, though, is that there's a cap on how fast the federal government's contribution would grow each year. It's 8%. Hospital costs, though, are growing far more than 8% a year.
The states are saying by 2030, with this cap in place, the Commonwealth's real share won't actually get to 42.5%. It might even go backwards from where it is now. Meanwhile, the states are looking at emergency departments overflowing, ambulance ramping, surgery wait lists growing, and they're being told to find billions more dollars that they just don't have.
And this is why the premiers of both sides of politics really united on that this week. They're saying that Albanese is breaking his promise. New South Wales Premier Chris Menz, who is also a Labor Premier, of course, Anthony Albanese is a Labor Prime Minister. It's quite unusual to see them go head-to-head like this. Menz really went after the federal government this week. He said that premiers from different parties right across the country, we're talking Queensland, West Australia, South Australia, the Northern Territory, they're all united. His point is we can't all be wrong.
No, they held an emergency meeting Wednesday to work out their strategy. The states reckon there's an $8 to $10 billion gap between what the feds are offering and what they were promised. Another thing to note is that in September, Albanese wrote to the premiers, essentially telling them to rein in public hospital spending growth if they wanted the new federal funding deal to be implemented, and that came to light this week.
Yeah, it did. You can imagine if a coalition prime minister wrote to the premiers telling them that. Labor would have gone ballistic.
Absolutely.
Anthony Albanese would have been this main spear thrower.
Yeah. Just rein it in, guys.
At exactly that approach. So, look, it's exactly the kind of cost-shifting blame game that Albanese has been very critical of when he was in opposition, and it all comes on the top of trouble in the NDIS. It's another thing bubbling away.
That's right, yeah. So just to remind you, the federal government wants states to co-fund this new Thriving Kids program for kids with autism, for example, who won't qualify for the NDIS anymore. The states and territories say that the funding deal doesn't work.
And there's been recent ministers' meetings on that too. So apparently the recent one from last week was so bad that the state and territory ministers asked the federal minister, who's Jenny McAllister, they wanted her and her staff to leave that meeting for half an hour so they could regroup.
Sounds tense.
Yeah, exactly. The quotes in the media, they were shocked by the unproductive and meaningless approach by the federal government. The states even threatened to boycott that meeting beforehand, so it's a tricky one.
Yeah, Chris Minns summed it up pretty well. He said the only thing the federal government's been asked to do in 20 years is take on disability care, and now they're trying to give it back. And now the states won't sign anything on the new disability program until the hospital funding is sorted. So they're sort of tied together, and that's all meant to happen by the end of the year.
The end of the year isn't that far away. Meanwhile, over in the coalition sort of space, Susan Lee is desperately trying to change the channel. After walking away from net zero and flagging support for immigration cuts on Tuesday, she's pivoted to defence. The irony is, of course, while the coalition's having its own dramas, Albanese's given them plenty to work with, but they're just not really in the headspace to be, that united front of criticism about the government. So, look, it's an interesting time in federal politics. That's for sure. Let's move on to the plethora of other news from the week. There's been so much going on around the country this week, so we thought we'd be best served by giving you an around the grounds summary. The federal coalition has come close to it but avoided it so far. It's killing season when it comes to coalition leaders, though.
Yeah.
Let's kick off in New South Wales and Victoria, where they've had a really interesting week.
They sure have. The silly season to some, but the killing season for politicians. We're referring, of course, to the leadership changes in both the New South Wales and Victorian oppositions this week. Starting with Victoria, Jess Wilson has become the first woman to lead the Liberals in that state. She replaced Brad Batten in what was described as a relatively bloodless coup. It was quite clinical and straightforward.
Yeah, what happened is 4 MPs visited Batten on Monday afternoon. They told him that he'd lost support of the party room. It was done pretty quickly. After that, Labor's been in power for 11 years in Victoria. The polls say they're on the nose. The Libs have gone, though, through 5 leaders. I think it's 3 leaders in the last year or so that they've had. They've had a really tumultuous time.
Yeah, Batten's fate was reportedly sealed when he reshuffled his front bench a month ago. He demoted key allies, which sounds dangerous, and he promoted Jess Wilson to treasurer, seemingly to keep her and her supporters happy and hold off that potential leadership threat, but clearly it didn't work.
Nice try. I mean, you've got to try something, I guess.
Keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Exactly. So Batten's colleagues, friends, enemies maybe, they were concerned that he had a tunnel vision when it came to Victoria's crime crisis, which is understandable because he's a former police officer. It's a big issue in the state. What his colleagues wanted to see, though, was more focus on the economy, given the polls really show that cost of living is still a big issue, the number one issue, some of the polls say in Victoria.
Yeah, which you can forget that, when you're focusing on the crime so much. Apparently Batten wasn't listening to that feedback. The government then announced its violent crime adult time laws. We spoke about those last week, and that sort of neutralised Batten's one big strength.
Yeah. As for Jess Wilson, she's a first-term MP. She hasn't been at this for very long, but she's got a bit of a background. She's only 35 years old, really young for an opposition leader, particularly, from my perspective of being plus 50. 35 seems very, very, very young.
Younger.
But she has worked for former federal treasurer Josh Frydenberg. Her dad was a Victorian MP. She worked for the Business Council of Australia. So she does have that business and economic focus. So they're saying she's in really good places to be able to take it up to Labor ahead of an election, which is in about 12 months' time. She'll move quickly.
Yeah, and if the Victorian coup was relatively bloodless, things were a bit more drawn out, slightly more painful in New South Wales. It became clear early in the week that Kelly Sloan had the numbers to oust Mark Speakman, but it took a few more days for her to strike.
Yeah, so Kelly Sloan, just a bit about her. She's a first-term MP as well. She was previously a Channel 9 journo. Jodie, you were saying you came across her a bit when you were at Channel 7.
Yeah,
So
rivals.
Rivals indeed. She served as the Shadow Health Minister, which of course is one of those key portfolios. 3 MPs went to Speakman on Wednesday night. They apparently came out saying his leadership was over. He wasn't having any of that. He came out on Thursday morning and did like all the media.
He was really digging in. By Thursday afternoon, though, Sloan had visited him herself and expressed her desire to take over. He said that politics is rough, it's brutal, it's savage, and Sloan was locked in as leader at Friday's party room meeting.
Indeed. We should also mention that the New South Wales Nats had their own change of leadership. So Ganesh Singh has replaced Dougal Saunders. He becomes the first Indian Sikh to lead a major political party in Australia. He says he doesn't want to be defined that way, though. He says that he's an Aussie. That's how he thinks about himself. Saunders wasn't killed off. He fell on his own sword, citing family reasons.
Yeah, he chose to go. One question is how much these state events are influenced by what's happening federally in politics. We saw Speakman trying to distance himself from Susan Lee's decision to dump net zero. On his way out yesterday, he blamed brand damage from the federal election for the poor New South Wales polls.
Yeah, he said that the results had worsened since the federal election in May. He pointed out there are existential issues facing the party. They don't really know who they are. They don't really know who they stand for. That's certainly the criticism. As for Kelly Sloan, she's a moderate, like her predecessor. So it'll be really interesting to see how she takes that party forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have Susan Lee federally and 2 female Liberal leaders in our biggest states now. Ronald Misen wrote in the Financial Review that it's a shift from that sort of pale, male, stale image that has been sort of lingering around the coalition. But all 3 women inherit a party that is teetering on outright crisis, he says.
Yeah, glass cliffs. Remember we had that discussion around Susan Lee, that you put a woman in just when things are really, really, really bad and expect her to clean it up. And, of course, it can be an impossible job. So let's see how they go. Let's get around other parts of the country. There's a big murder trial happening in Queensland that's dominating the headlines there, and also podcasts.
Yeah, the Toyah Cordingley murder, it's the current focus of the Case Of podcast, which is the repurposed Mushroom Case Daily show on the ABC. Toyah was a 24-year-old woman who was murdered while she was walking her dog on Wongetty Beach in far north Queensland in 2018. It's on that sort of rugged strip of coastline between Cairns and Port Douglas. Her body was found buried in the sand the next morning by her father. Rajwinder Singh, who is a former nurse, has been extradited from India to face the murder charge, and he's pleaded not guilty.
Yeah, he's accused of fleeing the country, leaving behind his wife and 3 children. That trial is underway in the Cairns Supreme Court. Singh's wife has given evidence that she hasn't seen or heard from her husband since he left for India in October 2018. It's actually a retrial after that trial in March this year. They had a couple of days of deliberation and couldn't come to a unanimous decision.
Yeah, the evidence is a bit tricky in this one. Police say that a DNA sample taken from a stick at the gravesite is 3.7 billion times more likely to have come from Singh than from a random member of the public. But there were other DNA samples also found at the scene. And this week, police went through the phone data and the car movements that they say show that Singh was there.
Yeah, as for Singh's team, they say that he witnessed 2 masked men kill Toyah and that he fled in fear. That trial is set to conclude early to mid-December this year, so that's going to continue to be a focus for a few weeks yet there in Queensland. Heading to Tassie, the state treasurer there is Eric Abetz. Jodie, you and I remember him from when he was a senator for
Very
Tasmania.
well.
Yeah. This week he didn't rule out raising taxes in next year's budget. That made front page news in Hobart. One of the big items that the government will have to fork out for if it gets across the line is the Macquarie Point Stadium.
Yeah, this is the $1 billion plus development that's scheduled to open for the 2029 AFL season. It's what needs to happen, of course, for Tassie to have its own AFL team, but it's expensive and it's been politically fraught. The next couple of weeks are big ones for the future of that development.
Yeah, good one to put on your radar. So the Tassie Parliament is actually voting on an order to bypass the normal planning processes. It would give final approval after all of this time for that stadium's construction. That's set for the first week of December. It's not really clear if it's going to get through. It's gone through the lower house. It has to go to the upper house. There's only 3 Libs in the upper house. There are 8 independents. So a lot of wrangling to do. Just a good one for your radar.
Yeah, absolutely. On to South Australia, and the death of Paralympic and world champion paracyclist Paige Greco was big in the news there. She was only 28 years old. She died at her Adelaide home on Sunday after she had a sudden medical episode.
Yeah, she actually started out as a runner. She switched to paracycling and she had some really early big success on road and on track. Kate McLaughlin, who was Australia's chef de mission at the Tokyo Olympic Games, she said that Paige was very, very well liked.
Yeah, she had a lovely tribute. On the track, she was unbelievable, but off the track, she was someone that would walk into a room and just light it up. Paige had cerebral palsy, which mainly affected the right side of her body, and her death was quite a shock.
Yeah, really, really sad for her family and for anyone who had that connection with her. Over to Perth, it's all about the Ashes. It's the first time in 43 years that a men's Ashes series in Australia has not started the Gabba in Brisbane.
That's my entire lifetime.
It's the first time that Optus Stadium has hosted an Ashes test match, and Brendan Doggett and Scott Boland will make history as the first 2 Indigenous players to be included in an Australian Ashes men's side.
Go the Aussies. Heading north to the Northern Territory for Tropical Cyclone Fina. It's expected to make its initial landfall on the Tiwi Islands early this morning, then crossing the Van Diemen Gulf towards the mainland coast around the Darwin area this afternoon and then early Sunday morning.
Yeah, there's expected to be heavy rain, potential flash flooding, destructive winds across quite a large area there. They're talking about wind gusts of up to 155 kilometres per hour, 100 to 300 mil of rain across a really big area. They get a lot of rain up there, so and they get a lot of cyclones as well, to be honest.
They're a hardy bunch.
They are a very hardy bunch, but of course there's a lot of islands in that area as well, and those coastal surges can be really dangerous, so they're looking out for that.
Yeah, as we say, cyclones aren't anything new up there, but if you're in the zone, we're thinking of you.
We got an email this week from a squizzer named Mike who just asked simply, why no world or national days anymore in Squiz the Day?
But we did quite a few of those.
Rap roundup. So we've lent into that this week. We've got more world days than you can poke a stick at and plan a menu around.
Well, to start with, today is World Kimchi Day. Are you a kimchi fan, Claire?
Sure, we can get across that. Yes, I do like some kimchi. It's quite good. It's pretty easy to make too.
Oh.
Just need some jars and a bit of cabbage.
Sterilised jars.
A bit of seasoning and away you go. Today also marks the start of the first G20 Leaders Summit to be held on the African continent. South Africa is hosting the summit in Johannesburg, and it's caught some fire from US President Donald Trump.
Yeah, so the G20 is a group of the world's largest economies, represents about 85% of global GDP. Every year they meet to discuss economic cooperation, and Trump and the US are boycotting the summit on account of what the president calls the white genocide of Afrikaners. We talked about that when it first popped up a few months back. Elon Musk was also talking about it on X, their claims which have been widely refuted.
Yeah, on Trump's decision, the President Ramaphosa there, he said it's the US's loss. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is there for that. On to Sunday, we're getting to the pointy end of Formula One.
I know you're into this, so I feel like I'm stealing your thunder a little bit. But look, Lando Norris is leading the charge going into the Las Vegas Grand Prix. He's currently on 390 points, with Oscar Piastri behind him on 366. There are 2 more races left after this one in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. So the chances of an Aussie world champion aren't looking too great.
Yeah, the tracks over in the Middle East might favour Piastri quite well, maybe. So let's see how he goes. Don't write him off yet, Jodie, please.
Sorry.
Thank you. There's been quite a bit of rain in Vegas. I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures in the news of Vegas flooding. So they're a little bit worried about that. They'll have to see how it goes. Monday Fairy Bread Day.
I'm sure my kids wouldn't complain if I were to give them some fairy bread for breakfast. Federal Parliament is back for what's set to be the final sitting week of the year. The Albanese government is keen to get those environmental law reforms through the Senate, and that's still far from certain.
Yeah, we talked about those when they were introduced. Deals need to get done either with the Greens or the Coalition. It'll go right down to the line. Also on Monday, a coroner's inquest will begin in Brisbane to investigate the collision of those two SeaWorld helicopters. Remember, that happened right at the start of 2023.
Yeah, terrible crash, and that will run until the 5th of December. To Tuesday, it's the 25th of November. It's a month until Christmas from Tuesday. So that's something to keep in mind.
Radio.
Start shopping.
Yeah.
Star Entertainment Group also has its AGM on that day. Things mightn't be too festive there. This year, the company has failed to meet its performance targets for the 7th year in a row.
Yeah, we won't go into the depths of that. But Star, of course, has been in a world of pain since regulators found that it was unsuitable to hold casino licences in New South Wales and Queensland. That followed big money laundering accusations. The regulator found that they were involved in some of that, also dealing with junket operators linked to organised crime.
Tuesday also marks the UN's International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Interesting timing there. Lachlan Young was sentenced this week to 28 years in prison for the murder of his former partner, Hannah Maguire, in Victoria. Molly Ticehurst's former partner pleaded guilty to her murder in the New South Wales Central West, and The Guardian had a video this week that wasn't flattering for Queensland police. It related to the murder of Hannah Clark and her 3 children in Brisbane.
Yeah, it's body cam footage. It suggests that officers coached Rowan Baxter on how to challenge a domestic violence order not that far before those horrendous murders.
Chilling.
Yeah. On Wednesday, Deputy Leader of the Libs, Ted O'Brien, is addressing the National Press Club. We could also be hearing a lot about Robert Irwin.
Yeah, he has tangoed his way into the finale of the US version of Dancing with the Stars. He is so popular over there. That airs live on Disney Plus at 3 a.m. our time. I probably won't get to that one, but diehards can set their alarms for a bit of an early morning jive or a foxtrot, whatever you like. So we'll see how he goes.
Yeah, I won't be setting my alarm either, but I'll definitely be diving straight onto the websites when I wake up to see how he did. It's International Cake Day, just to come back to it.
You know that my stomach's been rumbling this entire podcast.
Exactly.
Now it's going to be worse.
I'm not really helping. Where's Nikki with our freshly made cake?
Exactly.
Interlude and a couple of forks. Thursday is Thanksgiving. Good luck to you if you're in for some pumpkin pie and maybe some turkey. Speaking of turkey, the country, not the bird. Pope Leo is heading there for his first international trip since he took that role in May.
Yeah, there he will meet with Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, the leader of the approximately 300 million Eastern Orthodox Christians. He will also celebrate the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, which was the group to declare that Jesus is truly God.
So I had to pause there and Google what on earth that was all about. And I went to Google AI mode to ask for an explanation for a non-religious person. It says that it was a major historical turning point where early Christian leaders decided on a standardised brand identity for Christianity.
Sounds like very marketing speak,
It
doesn't
really does. They were at it way back then.
Back in Oz, and golf fans will be happy, Adam Scott is returning for his first Aussie tournament since 2019 at the Australian PGA Championship. That starts on Thursday in Brizzy. And the Walkley Awards will be announced on Thursday night. That's celebrating excellence in journalism.
You've judged the Walkleys?
I have in the past, yeah.
Have you been up for a Walkley?
I have not been up for a Walkley. My husband has. He was a very young winner of a Walkley.
Yeah, very prestigious family, the Spears Fordhams, that's for sure. The Walkleys, of course, are a very big deal in the news media world. We're up to Friday. Get your credit card ready for Black Friday, although I have to say my inbox is already absolutely drowning in sales deals already.
We're bombarded, aren't we?
Yeah.
The Matildas go head-to-head with New Zealand's football Ferns in a friendly in Gosford at 7:30 p.m. Friday night. Also on Friday, the final oral submissions will be heard in the inquest for the Bondi Junction stabbing attack that took place in April 2024.
One more national day that you need to know about. Friday is French Toast Day.
This got me thinking about whether the French actually eat French toast. I'm not convinced.
No one should eat French toast. I'm egg adverse, as you know, so no thanks.
No eggs at all?
No, gross.
Okay.
They're the worst.
Look, I'll get a croissant for you.
Squiz recommends, I don't have much to recommend this week. Tucker dying on me has kind of thrown me out of my routine.
Yeah, taken up a lot of your headspace.
It sure has, but I can recommend card writing. I've received a lovely card from one of my neighbours telling me how much they really liked Tucker and how sad they were. I've had so many lovely messages, text messages on social media, but I got a card
Yeah,
and
there's
it was
something
so
about
nice.
the handwriting, isn't it?
I'm recommending it, and particularly as we come into Christmas, I'm going to write Christmas cards this year.
Proper
I don't
ones.
think I've done that for about 20 years.
No WhatsApp messages.
Yeah, I was so thrilled to get a card, so I'm going to go for it this year.
I like that inspiration.
Yeah.
My reco this week is the mushroom tapes, which probably won't surprise you or any of our listeners. I had been hanging out for this one. It's Helen Garner, Sarah Krasnostein and Chloe Hooper, who are all individually amazing authors.
Yeah.
And they've got together on this project. It's quite an interesting format. I'm listening on
You're
audiobook.
listening. I've got the book and I've just started it.
See, I would find it kind of an interesting one to read because it comes across like a conversation between three people.
So tell me about the audio version. Are the three of them doing it?
They are.
Okay, that would be interesting
And I know
too.
Helen Garner's voice.
Yeah.
And then Sarah Krasnostein has an accent, so that makes it easier to tell who's speaking, which helps. And I feel it's a little bit experimental, that format, but I'm down with it. And Helen Garner points out that she's getting to a point in her career where she doesn't want to take on a whole trial on her own. It's such a huge thing to encounter. So she's doing this with the other two.
And of course, the way she has done her books in the past on very interesting trials, particularly murder trials, I can imagine it would take forever to actually produce that sort of work at that sort of level. So to team up with two other very smart women is a really interesting way to go. We'll put a link to that. Can't put a link to writing cards, but we'll put a link to the mushroom tapes into the episode notes. Moving on to Squiz Press. So starting Thursday, we wanted to tell you about a very sort of special 3-part shortcuts series that we're putting out. It's on the looming social media ban for teens. Andrew is going to sit down with Bryce from Squiz Kids, as you know. He's up to his eyeballs in all things online safety, thanks to Newshounds, which is our free digital literacy media program for primary school kids. We're so glad that Bryce and Andrew are going to do that.
Yeah, I'll be listening to that for sure. I'm right in that sort of zone. Lots of parents are. It's going to be in the news a lot in the coming weeks, and the Squiz team, of course, is all over it. So EP1 will look at how we got here, and then they'll unpack how it will work, what's in, what's out, how the world has reacted, and also what the future looks like for those big social media behemoths.
It's going to be practical, quick information so that you can know what's happening, also so that you can have a conversation about it. Like you can be that person in your friendship group who knows
like, guys,
what is happening. I've got it down.
Yeah.
That first episode is out on Thursday. It'll be over the coming weeks. Also out this week, we've got a Squiz Kids shout out. The kids of Australia got to give some advice to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Milton Dick.
Here's a quick clip of what he's usually dealing with.
I don't know why this is so difficult. When people are asking questions, don't interject. There's a lot of intelligent people here. Well, in the gallery there is. But order.
And the kids of Australia got to put forward some suggestions for how we can keep the pollies in line. Here's one of our favourites.
Well, what about this one from Clark, who's in Year 2 at Murrum-Bateman Public School in country New South Wales, just to the south of Yass, who says that when his class has been a bit chaotic, his teacher, Miss McLaughlin, calls out, "Waterfall," and the whole class then puts their hands up in the air and responds, "Shh," like a waterfall.
I could stand up in that big chair, and if I did the hands up in the air in the waterfall, I think everyone would immediately
Fall silent.
stop, listen and think.
It is so much fun. It's definitely one to have a listen to. It's out now in the Squiz Kids podcast feed. We're so proud of it, the work that Bryce and the team do there, Christy, Emma. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
we're also going to put that whole episode in the Squiz Today feed tomorrow just so more people can have a listen to it. We think it's really terrific.
Yeah, it makes it easier to access.
I think that's us done, Jodie, for another week. Thank you so much.
See you next week.
Have a good weekend.